Twitter Thursday has returned. That's right. We'll be answering your questions on today's LockedOn Giants podcast that's coming at you next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the LockedOn Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm Patricia Traina, and it is Thursday, or today is actually the Thursday show, August 11th. It is game day for the New York Giants. That's right. Happy game day, everybody. Giants face the New England Patriots in their preseason opener. That'll be tonight. And we, of course, will have coverage for you, a full breakdown of the game on Friday after we've had a chance to look at the tape. But until then, as promised, we have the return of our Twitter mailbag. This is the mailbag that we try to do once a week, where you get to send in the questions, and I do my best in trying to answer them. And we've got about a dozen or so questions for today. So I'm going to jump right in and try to give you some answers. So thanks to everybody for sending in the questions. And as always, thank you if you made us your first listen of the day or your first watch of the day if you are watching on YouTube. All right, let's jump in. First question, we're going to do all the Twitter questions first. First one comes from Ted Tompkins, who writes, now that two offensive linemen have gone down, I'm starting to get flashbacks to last year's offensive line woes. Please talk me up the ledge and tell me it will be better this season. Ted, thank you for the question. I'd like to say that I can talk you down off the edge, but as I record this, obviously the offensive line has not played in a game. All right. They will play in a game probably by the time a lot of you hear this podcast, if you listen to it closer to the evening hours on Thursday. So here's what I can tell you, Ted. The Giants have done a really good job, I think, of developing some of their younger talent. The injuries stink. There is no question about it. Matt Gono, who had the neck issue that they ultimately waived with an injury settlement, I'm not concerned with that. I mean, I'm concerned for the young man, obviously. I hope it is not career ending, but in all honesty, Joshua Zudu, I think, was making a push to become that swing guy anyway. So I'm not so sure if Matt Gono would have made the roster to begin with. The Marcus McKeithen injury, again, that is unfortunate, but I suspect he would have been practice squad had he, stayed healthy. So, he'll come back from that. He should be fine. It's just unfortunate that happened. I don't know what Zudu has going on. I know he was listed as questionable by Brian Dable for the Patriots game. So we'll just have to wait and see. But here's the other thing. I guess the thing that I can tell you to help talk you down off the ledge, there should be cuts around the league. Guys who are not going to make 53-man rosters. You can bet any amount of money that if the injury problem continues, that Joe Shane will be on the lookout for guys. And here's the other thing that I can probably tell you. Don't rule out the possibility of there being a trade somewhere along the line. Like, for example, if the Giants know a guy's going to get cut and they're going to cut maybe one of their edge rushers, well, maybe you try and swing a trade with that team. So this way you don't have to get into the so-called rat race, if you will, to get an offensive line or to get any position you need. So that's the best I can give you right now, Ted, regarding the Giants offensive line situation and why you shouldn't be on the ledge just yet. But of course, let's see what happens. A lot of summer still left to go before we can say that everything's going to be all right. All right. Next question is a Twitter question from Scott Dunham Wallace, Dr. Scott Dunham Wallace, who very kindly said that he found the podcast and really enjoys it. Scott, first off, thank you for those kind words. And by the way, thank you to everybody who has recently hopped on board the LockedOn Giants podcast. I know we've seen a lot of new subscribers come on, and I do appreciate all the newcomers. Matter of fact, stand up and identify yourselves, and I'll give you a shout out on the pod. I mean, that's the least I could do, right? All right. So anyway, Dr. Wallace asks, Dable's offense is quite sophisticated. He's really good at dialing back if he has to. However, the players have to know the playbook. Compared to prior years, how well do they? All right, Scott, I don't think we can compare apples to apples here because the prior system was a little less complex, I think, than this one. So it's not a true apples to apples comparison. The other problem, or the other challenge, I should say, is that when we watch practice, we being the media, we can kind of take educated guesses as to who looks like they know what they're doing and who doesn't. But that doesn't mean we're going to be right all the time. So, for example, Daniel Jones throws a pass and it comes up short of Kenny Goliday. All right, is it Jones's fault? Is it Golladay's fault? Is it that the defense just made a play? We don't know what the coaches are instructing the players to do because we're not close enough to hear that. Now, we can ask the coaches, which we have. We can ask the players, which we have. And they're all going to tell us the same thing, that they're making progress, that they're getting a grasp of the playbook, that they're getting better, a little bit better every day. Okay, fantastic. At the end of the day, Scott, it all comes down to what they do on the field. That's what's going to tell us the true tale. So for me to sit here and do a comparison, an apples to apples comparison to years past, just really not fair. Let's see when they start taking the field and we start breaking down the film and saying, okay, this guy looks like he's not running the proper routes, or this, the defender just made a great play, or whatever the case may be. So, but thanks for the question. Appreciate it. All right. Up next, we hear from Antoine. What are your overall thoughts on what you've seen from Daniel Bellinger in training camp? Antoine, I like Daniel Bellinger. I liked him in the spring. He caught everything thrown his way. I thought some of his blocking has been pretty good in the training camp. He's still young, obviously, still has to develop as an NFL tight end, but he's well on his way. And I do think he's going to be tight end number one, especially given the injury to Ricky Seals-Jones. And, Bellinger, I'm high on him. I'm definitely bullish that he's going to be good and he's going to get better as it goes along. How much the Giants are going to actually deploy the tight end in the passing game, that's another story. But certainly as a blocker, that's what Bellinger did really well at San Diego State. So I have no reason to believe that that'll change now that he's at the NFL level. Okay, next question. Actually, the first of two questions from Kevin McClay. The foam helmet pads are one visible sign of the change for the worst team in the league of keeping players healthy. What can you tell us about the foam helmets and other changes that you've seen that might give us hope for a healthier season? All right, Kevin, I believe those foam helmets are actually mandated across the league. It's a new thing that they're trying out. It's not just inclusive to the Giants. I believe offensive linemen, defensive linemen, linebackers, and there's one other position group which escapes me, might be tight ends. I'm not sure if there are other position groups, but certain position groups are mandated to wear it. It is a league experiment, if you will. The foam padding is supposed to cut down on concussions because it's supposed to provide, a little extra cushion, if you will, to the head should, somebody be tackled hard to the ground and hit their head on the ground. So that's the story behind those guardian caps, as they're called. As far as, other changes I've seen, obviously the stretching has come back, post-practice stretching. That had gone away under Pat Shurmur and Joe Judge, which I never understood why, because, every trainer you talk to will tell you that, it's always good to stretch after you do aerobic activity. I think another thing that has given me hope is how Dable and the medical staff or sports science staff have been handling the guys who are nicked up. In other words, last year, for example, Joe Judge, if a guy got injured, basically he would sit in summer. Think back to Kenny Goliday, for example. We were told when Kenny Goliday tweaked his hamstring that if it had been the regular season, he could have gone out there and played. But they kept him on the shelf rather than have him go out there and do much of anything. So, ask yourself this. If Kenny Goliday could have played, if it had been a regular season game, why wasn't he at least out there in the beginning doing, what he could? So a big difference, I think, with Brian Dable and the sports science team that he has assembled is that if a guy is dinged, they will let them do what they can physically instead of shutting them down. And this is important because this way the player doesn't sit around and acquire rust on him. All right. So to give you an example, if you go to the gym every day, you're going to get stronger, better, more flexible, or whatever your goals are. If you stop going to the gym for, a few days, a couple weeks, 3 weeks, whatever the case may be, well, guess what? Now, the next time you go back to the gym, you're not going to be at the same level you were when you stopped. You're going to have to build up again. And it's going to take time. And I think that was a problem for some of these guys to go from 0 to 100 miles an hour. So Dable and the sports science team, if a guy is physically able to do some of what some of his normal reps, he's out there doing it to avoid the rust and to keep his muscles and his body just conditioned. And I think that's a really, really big and underrated change in how the Giants are handling their injured players this year. All right, folks, we have more coming up on today's Twitter Thursday. More of your questions. Stick around. We'll be right back. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's LockedOn Giants podcast Twitter Thursday edition. But first, Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, but without the calories and without the sugar. Most Built Bars contain about 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. And they taste great, just like a candy bar, because they're covered in real milk chocolate. So if you're looking for a sweet treat without all the calories and the bad stuff, you'll want to check out Built Bar, and you'll especially want to check out Built Bar and their 9 amazing flavors, plus their rotating limited time offering, because when you place your first order and you use our special promo code LOCKED15, you will save 15% off your order. That's right. Take advantage of this. They have some great flavor offerings like birthday cake, brownie chunk, cookie dough. These are just some of the limited time offerings that they have. And they have more than just Built Bars. They have Built Puffs. They have Built Broth. They have the powder that you can mix into your drink, Built Boost. So a lot of great stuff over at Built.com. Check them out today. Use our special promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, and save 15% off your first order. Again, that's BuiltBar.com. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the LockedOn Giants podcast. I am Patricia Traina. We are having a Twitter Thursday, your questions being answered, the return of our weekly mailbag. So happy to have this back. It's been a while. All right, continuing with your questions, we have another question from Kevin McClave, who asks, there's almost always at least one surprising, if not shocking, preseason cut. What's your guess as to this preseason surprise? Ooh, excuse me. That's a tough one, Kevin. And I say that's a tough one because we haven't, as I record this, haven't seen any games, but I can tell you guys who I think are in jeopardy of losing their roster spot. Quincy Roche has seemingly slipped down to the bottom of the depth chart. I could see him being a cut. Ben Bredesen, I could see him being a cut. But I think if I had to give you one surprise, a guy that I'm not 100% convinced makes this roster. All right, here's one off the beaten path for you. I'm going to say punter Jamie Gillian. And I say Jamie Gillian because to my eyes, he's been inconsistent. And when we heard from special teams coordinator Thomas McGahee the other day, McGahee kind of, alluded to some of the things that Gillian still needs to work on. So I can't help but wonder if maybe the Giants punter for 2022 isn't yet on the roster. That doesn't mean that Gillian can't turn it around. He's got a big leg, but he has been inconsistent. I've been saying this going back to the spring, where sometimes he looks really good and sometimes you just sit there and you go, whoa, man, what's going on? So I guess that would qualify as my surprise, right? I mean, nobody's really talking about that, but I hope I'm wrong because, Gillian, he's a left-footed punter, has a big leg. He can probably help that team, but the consistency needs to be there. And, just as it wasn't there with Riley Dixon, which is why Riley Dixon isn't on this team anymore, got to have it with Gillian, because if it's not there, he's not going to be on this team in September. All right, moving on. Ruben Martinez asks, do you think the first team offense and defenses play more than one series each in Thursday's game? Yeah, Ruben, I do think that's very much a possibility. And here's why. What happens if the first team offense goes out there under the assumption that they're only going to play one series and they have a 3-and-out? Is that going to really help them? No, it's not. So I do think Brian Daboll is going to play the first team offense and defense. If I had to take a guess, I'm going to say we probably won't see substitutions until late in the first quarter. I don't think, worst case scenario, they'll go into the second quarter, maybe early second quarter. They definitely won't play into the second half, but I do think you're going to see most of the first team throughout the first quarter. That would be my guess right now. All right, next question. Turbo McGee. How do players feed themselves away from the building during training camp? Must be busy wives or girlfriends, also delivery and takeout, and some personal chefs. Ooh, interesting and different question. Turbo, probably no different than how they feed themselves when they're, during the regular season, probably no different how you and I feed ourselves. Probably there are nights when they do takeout. Some of them do have private chefs that pre-prepare meals. Some of them do have, significant others who maybe do the cooking. So there's really no one set way. I think also, if I'm not mistaken, some of them can get food in the cafeteria, especially the guys, who are living in a hotel. They can go into the cafeteria and get a dinner. So it really depends on, what a guy wants to do or what his regimen is. But that was an interesting question. Thank you for that. All right. The next question is from Andrew Arbuckle, who writes, where do you think Kenny Goliday fits into the offense this year? He looks old and slow compared to Wandale and Kadarius Toney. Kenny Goliday is an X receiver, whereas Wandale Robinson, Kadarius Toney can play inside or outside. So that's right off the bat, that would be a difference. But, regarding your observation that Kadarius Toney looks old and slow, well, he's had injuries. And he also has more mileage on his wheels. So I don't know that I would say he looks old and slow. I'm going to watch him carefully in the preseason games because that's going to tell a lot more. I mean, I don't want to say he's been dogging it in the summer because, that's not a fair statement, but there have been times when he just hasn't looked like he's been on the same page with the quarterback. Not necessarily old and slow, but he could be playing a little slower because it is a new system. It's much different than I think what he's been used to playing in. And it does require being on the same page with the quarterback. So I'm going to give Kenny Goliday the benefit of the doubt to see if he can step up and play. I mean, look, he's under contract this year. They can't dump that contract this year. Let's see what he turns out. And if he can be the guy that they think that he could be. All right. Speaking of Kenny Goliday, now we go to our email questions. And that next one comes from David C., who writes, one of the big disappointments last season was Kenny Galladay's lack of presence on game day. He seemed timid on the field, and it clearly reflected in his stats. Do you see Goliday becoming the downfield threat he needs to be to justify his big contract? You know what, David? I'm going to say no. And I say no because that contract is absolutely ridiculous. I know back when the Giants were courting Kenny Goliday, everybody wanted him signed, but just the way that contract was put together, I mean, my goodness, the Giants are going to have to, if they want to get out of that contract, I think after this year, they're going to have to eat some dead money. The other thing, to really justify that contract, Kenny Goliday, I would think, would have to be the guy that gets all the pass targets. And I just don't know that that's going to be the case. Nowadays in the NFL, most offenses, I think, try to distribute the ball around. They don't try to really, give it to one guy and make that one guy the bell cow. I mean, think back when Odell Beckham Jr. was here. When Odell was here, he was the only guy really the Giants had that could scare anybody. And everybody knew that Odell was going to get the ball. Everybody knew it. So therefore, the Giants became one-dimensional and they became easy to defend. So you look at Kenny Goliday and you also say to yourself, okay, well, the Giants have Saquon. They have Kadarius Toney. They have, when he gets healthy, Sterling Shepard will be back. They have Wan'Dale Robinson. I don't know that Kenny Goliday is ever going to justify that contract. Very few free agents do justify their contracts. And, that contract is just a monster. And I would not be surprised if the Giants' current management would like to get out from that contract. To do it, they're going to have to eat dead money. But that contract, don't know what the previous regime was thinking when they struck, with that structure, but it is what it is and it's on the books. So what are you going to do? Right. All right. We have a few more questions coming up from the mailbag part of Twitter Thursday. So stick around. We'll get to those right after this. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the LockedOn Giants podcast. I'm Patricia Traina. We have a Twitter Thursday for you. So we are answering your questions. Again, thank you to everybody who sent in questions. And thank you to everybody who has tuned in to listen or watch. And as a reminder, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe and like the channel. Click that little bell for notifications so that anytime I post a new episode, whether it be a short or a full episode, you will be notified. And if you are listening to us on any of our audio platforms, thank you so much. Hope you are subscribed. We do appreciate your support. All right, let's get back to Twitter Thursday, your questions. This next one comes from Michael Bryant, who asks about Daniel Jones. He goes, I know that he has not been able to be consistent in his career, but I believe he is going to have an amazing season that will shock fans. I listen to you every morning and want to know if you believe in Daniel Jones as I do, and think he will get the system done before the first game. Michael, first off, thank you so much for listening to me every day. I do appreciate the support. As I said, really, I'm humbled that y'all tune in, because I know you have a choice of Giants podcasts that you can listen to. So anybody who's listening to me, I thank you. Here's the thing, Michael. I tend to be, by nature, an optimistic person. I want to see everybody that's on the team do well. Because look, I'm sick and tired of writing about losses. I'm sick and tired about talking about losses. I've been screaming for the longest time about, the problems of the team, the poor drafts prior to, this year, the issues, the coaching, all that stuff. I don't want to keep talking about that because I feel like I sound like a broken record. So I want to start talking about good things. That said, the problems with Daniel Jones, while not all his fault, and we need to make that clear, they're not all his fault. Some of the ongoing issues with him include the post-snap processing, what he's seeing. It's almost as though he doesn't trust what he is seeing. And you can talk to anybody who covers the game. You could talk to the former NFL quarterbacks, personnel people, scouts, and a lot of people who are familiar, way more familiar with quarterback play than I am, have said the same thing about Daniel Jones. And that is that sometimes his throws, you just sit there and you say, dude, what are you doing? So my concern, Michael, with Daniel Jones is He is now in an offensive system that gives some options based on what the defense is showing. The quarterback and the receiver need to be on the same page. They need to see things the same way. If Daniel Jones was holding the ball too long before in the Jason Garrett system, and before that in the Pat Shurmur system, what's he going to do in this system? All right. There comes a time when you just have to step up, throw the ball, and just, whatever happens, happens. And, I look at some of the stats involving yards after catch and separation, average yards of separation. And I wonder how much of that was affected by Daniels holding the ball a little too long than he needed to. I wondered how much of that was affected by some of the decisions he's made. Now, that being said, Mike Kafka, Brian Dable have all said, Shea Tierney have all said that Daniel is making progress. It is a new system. It is a complicated system. It's not one that I think is going to be mastered overnight. I have said before on this program that I believe it would not surprise me if the running game has to carry the offense a little bit in the beginning of part of the season until the passing game gets further up to snuff. So I know that's a long-winded answer to your question, but it's going to take time. I'd like to think that Daniel is going to get it, and he is going to be the quarterback of this team for the future. Because look, if they have to start all over again next year with a rookie quarterback, probably going to add another year on to the rebuild. And Giant fans and us in the media, we're wanting to start writing about winning teams. We would like to get into the playoffs, because for all of us, it's extra work, it's extra paycheck, whatever. So yeah, the optimist in me is like, yes, Daniel Jones can get this. He's not stupid. He's working at it. He's doing all he can to prepare. But the realist in me says, let's wait and see before we, celebrate and say the quarterback problem is solved moving forward. So thank you for your question, Michael. Okay, next question comes from Grant W. from Birmingham, England. And it's also about Daniel Jones. He said, on a recent show with you and Coach Gene Clemens, let me start that again. He said, on a recent show with you, Coach Gene Clemens says Daniel's not coming back next year, whether he balls out or not. And I think I agree. If he does, the Giants won't pay the money. And if he doesn't, he's gone. So how can I put the team's performance this year in perspective, knowing we're having a new quarterback next year? Grant, I think you just have to look at the team kind of, building the camaraderie, building the chemistry, building up the comfort level. As far as the quarterback situation goes, I would think as long as the quarterback and the receivers are seeing things the same way, does it matter if it's Daniel Jones throwing or Tyrod Taylor? I think Daniel Jones is going to get a very, very long leash, if you will, to show that he can be the guy. I can also tell you, Grant, that Tyrod Taylor has been throwing the ball really, really well. And look, I've said this before. I was kind of surprised that there was no competition for the quarterback spot. But I think if it had been my call, I would have had a competition. Because yes, Daniel has played behind a bad offensive line. Yes, his receivers and skill position players have been hurt or haven't been the best that they possibly could be. Yes, the coaching staff and the schemes and the changeover has been a problem. But I keep going back to the turnover issue, which has gotten better, the post-snap reads, which is still pretty much an issue, and that is on Daniel, I think, to an extent, and just some other factors. And there is legitimate question that, that Daniel Jones needs to answer. I hope he does, because as I said before, I don't want to have to start all over again with a new quarterback, because now it's a new era And basically the team has to come up to speed, if you will, with a young quarterback. So fingers crossed, Grant. Okay, one more question, I think. No, I'm sorry. We have two more questions from the mailbag. Tyler Jones writes, I read your SI article on the 7 rising young players, and I was happy to see Darian Beavers make the list. What impresses you the most from him, and how do you see him growing with his team? All right. Tyler was referring to an article I wrote on Giants Country. I wrote, I think it was after the first 2 weeks of training camp, the 7 players that impress the most. All right. Regarding Darian Beavers, Tyler, I think the thing that most impresses me about him is how quickly he's fit in with this defense. I mean, he's a legitimate thumper, and he hasn't looked that bad in coverage, I might add. Usually when you have a thumper, they're usually not as proficient in coverage, but this guy is a thumper. He can blitz. His coverage is not that bad. So for a 6th-round pick, he's been a lot better than I think a lot of people anticipated. I think if you had asked me at the start of camp which rookie linebacker to keep an eye on, I would have said Micah McFadden. Darian Beavers right now, if there's a competition between the two, which I don't know if there necessarily is, I would say Beavers is probably ahead of McFadden. I don't recall McFadden seeing a whole lot of snaps with the first team defense now that I think about it, whereas Beavers has. So how do I see him growing with the team? Well, obviously, he's going to continue to grow in the defense, but special teams is going to be a big thing as well. And, you look at the contract situation, Blake Martinez is not signed beyond this year. Pretty clear to me that Beavers is the heir apparent at one of those inside linebacker spots. And defensive coordinator Wink Martindale, when he spoke to the media the other day, said that the inside linebacker position, that there is a competition, that it's wide open. Guys need to start separating themselves from the pack. So, that's one of the, most intense, I think, competitions on the team right now, because anything can go. So thanks for that question, Tyler. Okay, one more question comes in from Scott S., who asks, if Saquon Barkley has a subpar year, he's let go after the season. If he plays great, they can't afford to sign him, and again, he's gone. Do you see a scenario where if he's playing lights out this season, the Giants trade him mid-year to a contender to get some value for him? Probably not, Scott. If he is playing lights out, if the Giants are winning, why would you trade him? You're supposed to be evaluating Daniel Jones, and, if things are starting to click, why would you take away one of the pieces that's helping him click? I don't necessarily agree with you that they can't afford to sign him after this year. It's all going to depend on what his asking price is and what the Giants can afford to pay. Now, if Saquon balls out and wants to be paid like the top paid running back in the league, then yes, you're right. There's no way he's back, because I just don't see that happening. If he's reasonable and, is willing to come back at a, fair rate, given the amount of snaps he takes in the offense, I could see it working out. Especially, let's see what happens with quarterback, because again, if Daniel Jones isn't back, now you get another quarterback, a rookie quarterback on a rookie deal, which is going to be a lot less. And maybe now you can afford to keep Saquon. So a lot is up in the air, but, whereas I know earlier in the year, I was on the bandwagon of trade Saquon now while you can get something for him. It's pretty clear that they are counting on him to be a big part of that offense. And I'm just not so sure that they would move him, regardless if he's playing lights out or not. So thanks for that question, Scott. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for us on the LockedOn Giants podcast. Great questions, as always, from you guys. You never disappoint. So I hope I answered all the questions, and gave you something to chew on. Make sure you keep it here on the LockedOn Giants podcast. Tomorrow, we will have David Turner rejoins the podcast. David Turner was with me last year, and former NFL scout, worked with the Giants many years ago, amongst other teams. And he helps me break down the games. So especially now with the preseason games and with there being so much to talk about and so many guys to keep track of, having David's set of eyes on the game as well is going to be, I think, worthwhile. So that will be tomorrow. We'll be recording the show tomorrow morning, Friday morning. So it'll be out a little late, but we will have it out, and I hope you will check it out. And then we'll send you into the weekend. And then we'll start all over again on Monday with all new shows, as always, as the Giants continue their preseason and their summer training camps. So until tomorrow, everyone, enjoy the game on Thursday, and we'll see you tomorrow.